I am Dale Kramer-Cohen, president of PennNYC. You might have gotten a few messages from me throughout the past few years. I have the great pleasure of being president of PennNYC over, the last 4 years. We are the free Penn Alumni Association of New York City. Our goal is to keep the Penn spirit alive and vibrant. And based on the attendance this evening, obviously we're doing a pretty good job of that. We have 20,000 alumni in the tri-state area, so you have a lot of company. So after you finish networking this room, you have to come to the next event so you can meet a few other people. The way that we, if you don't know and you haven't gone to our website, the way that we engage our community is through a variety of hopefully engaging activities. They fall under the category of social activities, intellectual activities, being that we are Penn, cultural activities, sharing in joint community service activities, and business and career affairs activities like tonight. I am so pleased to be here tonight for a lot of different reasons, but the first of which is this is the second event in our Executives in Transition, Executives in Transition series. The reason that we started this series is due to the circumstances of the environment. And in November, we held the first event with Wharton professor Stu Friedman. He spoke on total leadership. I don't know if any of you, were any of you able to attend that event? Okay, well, we had 100 people at that event as well. And he talked about total leadership, which for him is really looking at how you can improve performance in the 4 domains of your life: personal, work, community, and self. I'm also happy to let you know that the third event will be held on March 3rd, 3-3, so put it in your calendars. And it's entitled Your Next Career Move and How to Market Yourself. And we have another fantastic panel. But tonight, you will hear from a very special panel. We're lucky enough to have 2 alums, the women. Thus, Trustees Council of Penn Women were kind enough to support us in this venture. And what's exciting about tonight is that we're really going to talk about how to navigate the storm of these uncertain times, particularly with respect to the job market and individual careers. And before I turn this over to Darby Dunn and welcome our panels, thank you so much for coming tonight. Marci, Darby, and Steve, thank you for coming. I need to just do a few shout outs, as they say. The first person you may have seen on a couple of notices, Wendy Vigro. Wendy, would you raise your hand? Wendy is the person who is responsible for organizing tonight's event, and quite frankly, she's the director of the Executive in Transition series and is the spirit and the drive behind its achievement. And I can't thank you enough. We are very excited, and it was really her mission to find a way to help the Penn community prepare and be better prepared for the ensuing times. So she's worked very hard to organize this event, and Wendy, thank you. I really appreciate all your work. Stephanie Grayson Zane. Oh, I have 2 photographers tonight. Hi. Stephanie Grayson Zane is the co-chair of the Business and Career Affairs Committee for PennNYC. And as co-chair, you have provided great guidance and support really over the past 4 years, and I can't thank you enough. We've kind of grown the organization together, and Stephanie has been fundamental in doing that, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Karen Chance is the lovely woman who was sitting outside. Karen, are you out there? Oh, okay. Sorry. She can't hear, but Karen is the Senior Associate Director of Penn Alumni Relations. Karen, that's Karen. She is our Sherpa guide. Yes, absolutely. Karen is our Sherpa guide for PennNYC, and it has been an incredible journey in trying to grow this organization and build this community here in New York. There are 2 other quick people. Merlene Manville. Merlene, are you here? Nope, she's not here. She's Lee's assistant who really helped us organize this. So we will let her know that we really want to thank her. And last but not least, Eric Vigro. Eric is our honorary bartender. He is not a Penn alum, but is married to Wendy. So Thank you so much for helping us. And last but not least, I really need to thank the Trustees Council of Penn Women for sponsoring our reception tonight. We could have had the event, but we would not have had these lovely treats. Without their generous support, we really wouldn't have had the opportunity to create a networking environment for all of you. I am a proud member of the Trustees Council of Penn Women, along with a woman named Lee Spellman. And if you don't know Lee, you will. Lee will come up in a minute to tell you about the Trustees Council of Penn Women. But first, I need to tell you about Lee. Lee is really one of the finest representatives of Penn alumni leadership. Lee is a managing director here at JPMC and has enabled us to have this space. At Penn, if you don't know her, you probably might have seen an email recently. She was elected as president of the Penn Alumni Board of Directors and chair of the Penn Alumni Executive Committee. That means she is representing all 250,000 Penn alumni. So Penn is very lucky to have Lee, and we are very lucky to have Lee here as well. She also just quickly serves on the Board of Overseers of the Graduate School of Education, on the Executive Board of Penn Medicine. She was a member of the Penn Alumni Council, a founding member of the Penn Club of New York, a co-chair of the Trustees Council of Penn Women, and I guess I could go on and on. And the greatest thing is that Lee and I were actually at Wharton together. So we have found each other again and been able to build a community here in New York. It is so special to have her here tonight. Please help me welcome Lee Spellman.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's great to see this kind of turnout. And I just want to really acknowledge Dale's tremendous efforts on behalf of PennNYC. If it might not surprise you to know that the salary for this job is not very high, as in zero, and there are no dues to be a member of PennNYC. Anybody who is a Penn grad is automatically a member. All you have to do is join the listserv, and you have access to all the tremendous programs that Dale spends an incredible amount of time, energy, and effort planning. So I think we all should give her a huge round of applause. It's often a very thankless job. I am thrilled to be the new president of Penn Alumni. It's just amazing. I have been at so many alumni events across the country and even across the world. I was in 2 events recently in London and Paris, and the enthusiasm that people feel towards Penn is just, it's really just heartwarming and really incredible and astonishing. People want to be connected with Penn, and the university is doing great things, and it's a great time to be affiliated with Penn. Now, the Trustees Council for Penn Women is an organization that's a little over 20 years old, and it's a group of female alumni who have a passion for improving the lives of women at Penn. I know there are a lot of guys in the audience. Don't worry, we care about you too. But the mission of this organization is essentially to make sure that we are doing the best possible thing for our female students at Penn, female faculty at Penn, and our female alums. And one of those issues is around the issues of career development, career leadership, and hosting events like the one we're doing tonight. So we're thrilled to have you here, and we're thrilled to support this event. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dale to get the program underway. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to get to what you really came here for. I'm very, very happy. I am simply going to introduce you to the moderator, who's going to do a fantastic job of introducing the panelists. Darby Dunn is an alum. Should I say the year? No, that's okay.
98.
Thank you. 98. And we're not dyslexic. Darby Dunn is the founder of Darby Dunn Communications, a public relations and media training firm. She started her business as a result of being a veteran television reporter and anchor with more than 15 years experience working for national television networks and local affiliates. The bulk of her tenure was really at CNBC, so you actually may recognize her, where she covered everything from the dot-com bubble to the real estate boom and bust. She has interviewed hundreds of business owners, corporate leaders, and public figures, from U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger to General Electric CEO Jeff Immelt. We are very, very happy to have her here. And If you really want to know how to speak publicly, I definitely suggest you to call her or email her. Anyway, with that, Darby's going to let you know exactly what's happening for the rest of the evening. And enjoy and welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. It's great to see such a big crowd on such a cold night, and I think it's a reflection of the Penn community. I think it's also a reflection of the macro environment that we're in. They're very uncertain times, and we're very lucky tonight to have two experts on the American workplace, two authors. The first is Marci Alboher, who was my classmate at the University of Pennsylvania way back when, and she is the author of a fantastic book called One Person, Multiple Careers, and it's about how the slash effect can work for you. And the slash effect is basically having multiple careers, either at different points in your life or pursuing multiple passions at the same time. Marci has also wrote for the NewYorkTimes.com the career column, and she's also been published in numerous other places. Her work has appeared also on the Today Show, MSNBC. She's been on CNBC.
With Darby.
With me and with others too, I think, right?
Others, yeah.
Business Week, National Public Radio, and the Wall Street Journal. And Marci herself is a slash. This is fascinating because journalism is such a tough field, but Marci began her career as a corporate lawyer. She worked as a corporate lawyer for more than 10 years and then made the transition to very successful freelance journalist. And I think, if I remember correctly, your first published story was in the New York Times. Isn't that right?
Yes.
So that is just amazing. So very impressive. And her work, her articles have also appeared in Time Out New York, Travel and Leisure, Marie Claire, The Chronicle of Philanthropy, Legal Affairs, and the International Herald Tribune. She's a popular teacher, a fantastic writing teacher. I myself took one of her courses, and I really enjoyed it at the New York Writers Workshop. She helps novices break into journalism and helps to coach people to get on to the next level. Our other panelist that we're very lucky to have tonight is Stephen Greenhouse. He is the author of this book, The Big Squeeze, which is about tough times for American workers. This came out just last year. I've been reading it over the past week. It is a fascinating look at what goes on in the American workplace, really a sobering look about how the United States is doing in the workplace, how corporate America is treating its workers, in contrast to how workers are treated in other countries, everyone from blue-collar workers to white-collar workers. Stephen, for more than a decade, has been the labor and workplace reporter for the New York Times. And in a review of his book, the Washington Post columnist says that Stephen Greenhouse has written the essential economic book. Long before most analysts noticed the downturn, Greenhouse was reporting on how troubled our economy looked from the bottom up. He is a hugely talented reporter with a passion for justice, a shrewd student of the new economy, and a brilliant guide to the contemporary labor movement. Greenhouse writes with clarity, energy, and grace. And I thoroughly agree with that review. It's a fantastic book. So welcome both of you and thank you for coming to join us tonight. I wanted to start, first of all, by asking the audience a few questions so that way our panelists can tailor their answers to most suit your interests. If I could have a raise of hands, tell me, first of all, how many out there are looking for work or feel that are concerned about job security? Can I have a raise of hands? Wow.
Yeah.
That looks like 60% or more. Oh, I know. How many of you been in the workforce already for more than 10 years? Okay. And how many of you are interested in shifting from one type of work to a different one at this point in time? Okay, so a lot of you are interested in shifting careers as well. Okay, good. So that kind of gives us an idea of people's concerns and interests. So Stephen, I'd like to start with you. Your book is a pretty sobering account of what's going on in the American workplace. And it was written before this economic crisis steamrolled into what it is today. Now we have the unemployment rate in this country at 7.2%. Every day I open up the papers, there are at least 3 or 4 companies laying off hundreds to thousands of workers. So from your perspective, covering labor, covering different workplaces, what is the situation? How dire is it? And how have things changed perhaps from when you wrote your book, if at all? I mean, obviously they've gotten worse in many respects, but in what other ways have they changed?
First, I wanted to say I'm honored to be here, and I want to thank Dale and Wendy and the Penn Trustees Council and the New York Penn Club, or alumni. Anyway, I'm honored to be here. Thank you. I'm not a Penn graduate. You'll forgive me. So I'm a minority of one here. So I set out to write this book 4 or 5 years ago. I've been labor and workplace reporter for the New York Times for a little more than a decade now. And around 2003, 2004, when I set out to write the book, my sense was that for millions of American workers, things were already pretty bad. Wages have been stagnant for several years. The nation was losing lots of manufacturing jobs. Health benefits were getting worse. Pension benefits were getting worse. And I, perhaps presumptuously, set out to write this book to kind of help bring to the news media's attention, to the nation's attention, that for like the bottom 80%, 70% of workers, things are really not that good. And and kind of the undercurrent of my book is there's one group in society that really has it pretty good: workers in the financial sector.
Wow. How things change.
Yes. So the book came out last April. Paperback comes out next month. And as many of you know better than I, things have gone very south, far south for white-collar workers and financial sector workers. And in the last year, we've lost 2.5 million jobs, which is a hugely scary number. The financial crisis remains very deep, and Jamie Dimon said that the worst might be ahead of us yet. I mean, it's very scary. I mean, this is the worst economic crisis since 1929. And Henry Paulson, Ben Bernanke, the president-elect are doing everything they could to arrest the hemorrhaging and the fall. And it is startling that in the last 3 months we've lost basically 1.5 million jobs. And as I said, my book focuses a lot on retail workers, factory workers, and it doesn't focus quite as much on white-collar workers because a lot of white-collar workers are doing pretty well. I do write some about white-collar workers who are forced to work as independent contractors and therefore didn't get health benefits or pension benefits. But the big difference since the book came out is that the financial sector has been in crisis, and many, many workers are losing their jobs. Someone asked me, what would I do different about my book if I were writing it now, if it were coming out now, rather than a few months back? I said I'd change the name to The Humongous Squeeze rather than The Big Squeeze.
I was thinking of a different word than squeeze. I was thinking of something. But now you have a whole new area of material for another book, if you want to write one, unfortunately. New material in that respect. Tell me, Marci, as the New York Times online columnist about people and their careers, shifting careers, what did you notice over the past year?
Well, I want to be equally thankful of sitting here today and thank all the same people that were mentioned by Steve. But it's really nice to be sitting up here with you again and to meet Stephen, whose work I've admired for a really long time in the Times. So, Stephen is really looking at things from the macro picture and looking at the individual worker, which you write about in great detail. And I kind of took the approach that when I wrote my book, which came out about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, I was actually writing what I thought was a very hopeful and encouraging message that people are doing this thing that I dubbed slashing, and they were doing it for all these kind of positive reasons, like work-life balance or kind of self-actualization, or kind of they wanted to be more Renaissance, right? They wanted to be bankers and yoga instructors, right? They wanted to be lawyers and chefs. They wanted to work on that novel while holding on to the corporate job. And I was finding all these people who were figuring out these ways to build lives around that. Or they were just trying to manage being an active parent, whatever job they had, which is a major slash that's affecting all of us because people parent in different ways than they used to, and it requires a different kind of level of involvement than it did when earlier generations were parents. So my book was kind of part narrative journey and part in tutorial on how to do this, how to create a life that lets you be many things at once, or in succession where you do a lot of blending and blurring along the way. So I wrote that book, and it took, it took hold, and people were starting to use the slash term. And then suddenly, as the economy fell apart, there was a lot of people in the media calling me to talk about slashing by necessity, because what happened in the last 6 months is that lots of people are slashing because they have no choice. Everyone is moonlighting. Everyone is consulting. Everyone is looking to figure out if they do have some saleable expertise, either to carry them through to their next place of employment, next serious long-term employment, or because we're all going to be starting to live a life that's more about moving from project to project and gig to gig. Tina Brown wrote a piece that I really liked in this week's Daily Beast called The Gig Economy, and she was writing mostly about the media, where everybody you're talking to these days is, oh, I'm working on this, this speech, I'm working on this article, and it's for this employer and for that employer, and so many of us in the media have always worked like that, but many of us expect that that's kind of what it would look like to work for media. And I grew up as a freelancer in the media. I never worked full-time in one place. My Times relationship is the most committed relationship I've ever had anywhere as a media person. So,
Stephen,
that's the turnaround I'm seeing.
And you touch on this as well when you talk about how the American workplace has become much more entrepreneurial because there's been this erosion of the social contract. Tell us about the social contract, its erosion, and why that happened and where it stands now.
At the risk of sounding like a historian, in my book, The Big Squeeze, I have a chapter actually called The Rise and Fall of the Social Contract, and I'm really writing about our parents' and our grandparents' generation, that after World War II, a lot of American companies are doing very well. Labor unions pushed them to be more generous to workers, and the result was this terrific social contract that really became model for the world and was crucial to forming the nation's great middle class. And the social contract basically was, good, solid wages. Remember, once upon a time, fairly or unfairly, the woman in a household often didn't have to work. The husband made enough to support, his wife and 2.5 kids. There were very good health benefits. Mm-hmm. There was a very good pension. Generally, people had job security, and from around the late 1940s up until the 1970s, 1980s, things were really going gangbusters for the American economy, and there was really a social contract that, if you worked hard, your company would treat you well. I mean, there was really kind of mutual respect between companies and workers, and companies really shared their profits and prosperities quite generously with workers. And after the 1970s and into the 1980s, things changed very much because of pressure from imports, because of the oil crises. I think Wall Street, with the rise of mutual funds, started putting much more pressure on companies to get that stock price up and to get profits up. So companies really started, pardon the word, squeezing their workers much more, and we saw instead of the old job security of old, we saw more and more downsizing. So job security was deteriorating. More and more companies were getting cheaper on health insurance, and now we have 46 million Americans without health insurance. And we've seen companies move away from the very good, steady pensions of old, which many companies can't afford, where you get monthly stipend for life once you retire, and they've been replaced by 401ks, which many people tell me is a misnomer. We should call them 101ks at this point. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there's less health security. There are many holes in health insurance. There are many holes in retirement security, and job security isn't as great as before. So, as Marci said, we had an economy where people really generally had great job security, mm-hmm. and now, as all of us know, people move more and more from job to job. But now even gigs are increasingly replacing jobs.
Right.
I don't think a gig economy is a great thing. It might be a fact of life, but
this article I'm referring to was
yes.
not positive.
Yeah, it's great for companies because they don't have to have all this head count and pay all these health and pension benefits, and they get people as they need them. In my book, I call it a just-in-time economy.
Right,
You're
with the perma-lancers
worker, yeah.
and the
and it's and Marci's been wonderfully successful as a freelancer, and I bow down to you for that. But it's very hard to make it as unless you're super talented, to make it as a gig worker because you're always looking for the next gig and trying to balance 3, 4 things.
Right, and I just want to add one thing to that. I think there's this issue. I've made it work and I've enjoyed it, and I'm entrepreneurial. I kind of want to work that way, but I don't think everyone is. And one of the models that I covered a lot in the book is this combination of something that looks like employment and something that's entrepreneurial. And I see a lot of people doing that, where they have something that has all the trappings of a job, which is, and sometimes it's just one big client, and one big relationship, and then something that is entrepreneurial. And I look at it as kind of diversifying your portfolio. So you're little in bonds and you're little in the market. And it's a little like taking that approach to your career.
And in this economic downturn, has that helped people? I mean, have the slashes who are doing that find themselves in a better position?
Certainly. And there's many people who, if one slash is drying up, they can tend to the other, and they can balance those and have something that thrives in good times. And most people weren't building them those ways, though. Most people were building their slashes by their interests. They were building them because one of our classmates that I chronicled in the book is an art dealer and a Pilates instructor, and she's been managing her time. The art dealing is her own business, plus she's writing an academic book in that area, and she's got a Pilates job that she does as a gym, at a really high-end gym. It provides her a certain amount of income. It's where her health insurance came for a large chunk of her life. As her business got more successful, she was able to scale down to the Pilates till she didn't need it anymore, but she's still slashing because she now has her own business and she has a contract to write a book, which pays for part of her life. So I see it in all different permutations.
I just want to add, I don't want to say gigs are bad. If you
Right.
get laid off, it's much better to have 2 or 3 gigs to support yourself or support the family than to have nothing. And if you're a laid off accountant or laid off director of TV commercials, maybe you could find create separate gigs as an independent contractor that helps pay the bills. But my point is, it's generally better to have a real job, a full job, than trying to juggle 4 or 6 gigs.
With some job security, some promise, and some loyalty from the employer. Do you see that coming back? Is the social contract dead and gone forever? Or do you think maybe this crisis will highlight some of the issues that workers are facing and people will be paying more attention, and maybe you'll see a little bit of a return to that more loyalty between the employer and the employee?
I'm sorry to say, Darcy, I don't see it coming back near term for several reasons. The economy is extremely weak right now, and there's a lot of slack in the job market. So it's harder for workers to say, I don't want merely a gig. I want a good full-time job with good wages, good benefits. So with the unemployment rate so high and rising, the employers can say, look, we're just going to hire you part-time. I'm just going to hire you on a gig. I think globalization is another big factor. I have this wise-ass line in my book that globalization hit the bud crowd in the 1980s, but in this decade it's hitting the Starbucks crowd. And by that I mean in the 80s, globalization in the form of imported steel, imported cars hit factory workers, but now for the first time in the history of the world, all these white-collar jobs can be moved to India, China, Philippines, Romania, Russia. And so many white-collar workers, architects, accountants, software engineers, their jobs have suddenly become vulnerable. So I think, many companies can say, well, we're going to move your job to India. So I think that also makes it harder to recreate the good, steady social contract of old.
As difficult as the white-collar workers have it, the blue-collar workers and the immigrant workers in this country have it really hard, as Stephen shows in the book. And one of the most heartbreaking passages in the book that I read was about a 14-year-old illegal immigrant from Mexico who got a job at a Walmart, and he would work the overnight shift, something like 11 o'clock at night till 8 in the morning, 7 nights a week. First of all, it was illegal because he was only 14 years old, and he's working 7 nights a week. Mopping the floor and waxing the floors, and the chemicals from the wax even corroded through his shoes, etc. That just broke my heart. I mean, as the parent of 2 children, to see that kind of stuff still goes on. I mean, I read books from historical fiction. You read about the atrocities of the industrial age and things that happen. And there's so many terrible things going on in the American workplace now. Tell us about some of the other heartbreaking stories that you uncovered.
Okay. I know there are a lot of laid-off white-collar workers, and it's no fun to be laid off. And in my book, I tried to explain that for many workers, especially in many ways female workers, they're really treated badly. They're abused, and I have several tales about. Well, I write about a factory worker from upstate New York, Syracuse, named Kathy Somyer. And she dropped out of high school to help support her family. Her family was on welfare. She got a job for Catholic Charities. Then she worked as a cook at Syracuse University. And she wanted to move on. She wanted to move up in the world. And her sister said, "There's this new factory that makes plastic cups for yogurt and cottage cheese and cream cheese, and that you could rise pretty quickly there." So Kathy Somyer got a job at this factory that had 180 production employees, and in her first 13 months there, over a 13-month period, 4 of the 180 workers had fingers amputated, getting stuck in printing presses, getting stuck in injection molding machines.
And one who had only been on the job a couple days and wasn't properly trained.
Yes. Wendy Bibbs. Yes. So Kathy, wasn't the type of person who put up with stuff. So like she filed a complaint. Well, she filed a complaint with with OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, about the machines not having the proper guarding equipment. She also filed a complaint with the EEOC because there was horrible sexual discrimination, sexual harassment there. The 20 best jobs on the factory floor were for the technicians who fixed the machinery. Only one of those 20 jobs were held by a woman. The worst jobs were, the incredibly boring jobs, taking cups out of the injection molding machine as they came out. 92% of those jobs were held by women. And those jobs, paid like 30–40% less than the men's jobs. Plus the men would, grope, pinch, touch, grab the women all day long and ask for certain sexual acts. And the women would complain to management, and management basically took well, boys will be boys, we don't care. Anyway, so Kathy complained to the EEOC, and she also headed a unionization effort at the plant. So, she's developing a reputation as a very courageous woman. So what does the company do? At one point, one day she goes into work and they say, "There's a police officer downstairs, he wants to talk to you." And she was accused of sabotaging a co-worker's car. And she said, "That's ridiculous, why would I do that?" And she said, "You're just trying to set me up because I've spoken out against you." Another day she went into work, and she was basically put into solitary confinement. She was put in a room all by herself, where she was basically barred from speaking to anybody. And they were hoping clearly she would quit. And she lasted for 2 weeks, and she didn't quit, so they moved her back to the factory floor. And then finally, they told her one day, "You're being suspended for sexually groping 2 male workers for supposedly pulling down their pants," and she kind of had a breakdown. She had to go to the hospital. She was so stressed out then, and the next day they said, "Well, you're fired for this." And long story short, and I've gone on too long, I'm sorry. After a year, 14 months of litigation, a judge said, it was illegal for them to fire you. You were fired because you were complaining to EOC, complaining to OSHA, pushing for a union, and the judge said that the company had totally concocted the story about her supposedly groping these 2 people. So, her story is the only story in the book where I write a full chapter about, because it's our home state, New York, and I was amazed that some employers in New York treat workers so badly and really abuse them terribly when they stand up courageously.
And that touches on everything you write about the demise of the union. I mean, it's almost like union has become a dirty word in this country. It seems that every other person I talk to doesn't have anything nice to say about unions, but you point out that unions were very effective for many, many years at protecting workers and ensuring rights. Sure, they made mistakes and went overboard in some areas, but I mean, they've really slid to such low membership now, and that's why corporations, public companies can get away with a lot of the things they get away with.
I mean, economic studies, this is not me. These are professors at, Larry Katz at Harvard, professors at MIT. Their studies show that the declining rate of unionization, accounts for like 20–30% of the wage stagnation that the average worker has faced over the past quarter century. And yes, Darcy, there are some real problems with unions, but again, many historians and economists say one of the reasons for the formation of this great social contract after World War II was that unions were strong enough to use their leverage to pressure companies to be more generous. Of course, anticipating some questions, after World War II, the European economy, the Japanese economy really decimated, and it was very easy. American companies are making very good profits, so it was easy for them to share their prosperity. I think unions are trying again to become stronger because they say, if unions are stronger, that might help preserve job security, that might help improve wages. Corporate America says, bull, look what's happening to the UAW. Corporations say because, the wages and benefits for the auto workers are so high, that's made the auto plants uncompetitive vis-a-vis the Japanese and the transplants. So it's a complicated issue.
Marci, you've interviewed hundreds of people, and some of them belong to unions. What was their feeling? I remember, wasn't there a longshoreman who also was a film?
Yeah. There was one union worker in this book who...
Did they feel that the unions served their interests and helped them, or?
Well, I think in the longshoreman's case, he was really working the union rules to his advantage. He found it really easy in his particular local. He had generations of experience there, and he found it very easy to actually get the deal he wanted, which is he was very able to rack up time and then take time off to pursue his film work, which was his slash. So I am not an expert on the union beat, so I don't, I think I'll defer to Steve on those questions because it's not something I've been covering. But one thing that if there is a bright spot in the economy and a place that I'm encouraging people to look right now is I think this is going to be an interesting time for startups and for smaller companies to be filling the gaps and really where a lot of people are going to be finding opportunities. And one thing that is pretty much of a hallmark of kind of the new economy way of doing business is something that it's not really in workplaces that would be really union appropriate, but the whole idea of transparency and social responsibility is taking hold, and I think we're seeing that a lot in West Coast companies, in technology companies, and in smaller startups. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for workers at all levels to think about smaller companies as the new home, rather than I think workers are losing trust for big companies and big business.
Smaller private companies that don't have to answer to shareholders.
Yeah, and I think workers across the board at all levels are losing trust for big business. So I just think we're going to see, and I think the entrepreneurs in the room are going to be able to benefit that also, because I think there is a real surplus of talent right now for people who are doing startup ventures. And I think anybody who's in that realm is seeing a lot of opportunity to scoop up people who are reluctant to go sign on with a company that provides them no greater security than a startup does.
Are there any sectors that you see startups growing, and do you hear people talking about, this kind of sector?
It's
definitely not media, so I don't know.
I think, if all the journalists went and solved the energy problem, we'd be really applauded, right? So obviously renewable energy seems to be top of the list. I think anything that caters to an aging population, so anything that has to do with healthcare, with pharmaceuticals, medical devices, technology, anything, education, and actually, I will tell you, careers are a really growth industry right now. People are really interested in skills training and adult education. We're living longer and we're working longer, and because we have to, we're going to need skills training for all these reinventions that people are doing. So that's a huge growth area.
Sorry, I want to. Marci stole my lines. Darcy said. Garby was going to said she would ask us about where might be promising fields in terms of jobs, and I remember Dustin Hoffman saying in The Graduate, plastics.
Yeah, right.
So my answer today was going to be
old people,
healthcare, and green jobs.
Oh, okay.
Because those seem to be the only sector of the economy that are really growing. And when you look at what was the headline today? Obama introduced an $825 billion stimulus plan
for new jobs
in the House. A lot of that's going to be, maybe you want jobs building roads. We shouldn't forget that. But a lot of that's going to be in green jobs, renewable jobs. They'll want engineers, they'll want factory workers, they'll want consultants, they'll want managers, and and the
Technology,
and of course technology, and our health system keeps growing and growing and growing, and we need jobs, especially with the population getting older and older. As Marci says, there'll be a demand for workers working with the elderly, and there are also a lot of jobs in teaching. I think for someone who maybe had a good job in the 100 to 200,000 range and lost it, and maybe that financial job's not going to come back. Well, maybe you can get a good job teaching math for $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. And there's a lot of demand for good math and science teachers. I know a lot of people look down at teaching, but it can be there are a lot of jobs out there, and they provide very good security. And you get your summers off, and there's a lot of personal satisfaction. I'm just talking about what are areas in the economy.
The other thing we haven't talked about, and we have a room probably largely financial people, is government regulation and compliance. So I think we're all seeing that's I spoke to a group of accountants last night, and there is a lot going on in the compliance area, and people are hiring, and I do wonder. This question I have is whether government jobs will be a place that people go, and young people go, and young Wharton grads go to get that security, because it doesn't exist anywhere else. So,
do you think there'll be a shift, Stephen? Do you think younger people will seek out more security, or do you think it's just going to totally become more of a gig economy or entrepreneurial type of?
I think when the economy is booming, people almost don't even worry about security. I think, and they often, you asked before about what's happened to the social contract. Another aspect is workers feel less loyal to their companies, and companies feel less loyal to their workers. So there's a lot more being laid off, being fired, a lot more people jumping from company to company. So I think when the economy is doing well, people are happy to jump across the street to another company. Now, with the economy doing worse, I think people are grasping for whatever they can, and they want job security. And if they don't get job security, they'll go after gigs. It's true, as Marci says, there's a lot of government spending now. There'll be more government jobs. In light of the financial crisis and the Madoffs and the subprime mortgage, there's going to be a greater demand for accountants, both in government and in the private sector as well, I think.
You talk about that, you highlight in your book some companies that do treat their employees very well. Costco, Patagonia, Ernst & Young, was that the other one? Tell us a little bit about how they treat their employees well, and do you think they'll be able to continue to do so in this economy? And are there any other companies that people in the audience might want to look at that do offer good benefits and security for the employees?
So in the book, I write about some companies that really don't do a great job in how they treat their employees, and I write about managers like Walmart and Toys R Us and Taco Bell cheating workers. But there are some companies that do a terrific job, and the founder of Costco, Jim Sinegal, decided from day one, I'm going to treat my workers well, and the typical Costco worker makes basically, after 4 or 5 years on the job, 70–80% more than the typical Walmart worker. Not many of you are going to become Costco stalkers, I understand. Patagonia is an incredible place to work. It's
surfing at lunch.
I mean, it's 150 yards from the Pacific. It sells elite clothes, but again, the founder had a vision. Again, I'm going to treat my workers well, and he literally encourages workers to go surfing, no bull, 2.5 hours at lunchtime. And he trusts them to use their flex time to finish up at 10 at night at home to get the job done. They provide, Patagonia provides, 8 weeks paid maternity leave, 8 weeks paid paternity leave. If you adopt, 8 weeks paid adoption leave. And they really, believe in helping people balance job and family. I write about Ernst & Young as well, and some of the accounting firms, Pricewaterhouse as well, they do a great job in how they treat their workers. And, a lot of law firms, Google, Genentech, that want and need very talented workers who have the ability to move from company to company. Those companies often, of course, do a great job in how they treat their workers. In writing about Ernst & Young, I focus on a former chairman of the company who said, I grew up in the Bronx, and when I grew up in the Bronx, all the smartest girls in high school, all the smartest kids in high school were girls. When I went to college, all the smartest kids were girls. When I began at Ernst & Young, all the smartest accountants were women. And he said, but it was crazy. I realized only 5% of the partners at Ernst & Young were female. And he said, something is really wrong here. So he, in a very conscious, deliberate effort, changed in a dramatic, radical way the corporate culture. And he created, this wonderful flex time, not just he, but, the whole board, so that it used to be, people would work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. If you wanted to go to, Johnny's or Janie's soccer game or basketball game, forget it. It would be a demerit if you left, before 5 or 6 o'clock or to go to a PTA meeting. So now they provide great flex time. So people can work 4 days a week, 3 days a week, 2.5 days a week. As long as you work at least 50% time, you get full health coverage. And as a result, a far higher percentage of women are staying. They're not leaving after 2 years or 3 years or as soon as they give birth. And now 1 out of 3 people being made partner at Ernst & Young is female. And I think the board is up to about 15-20% women at this point.
And they feel it's good business because then you don't have to pay to retrain
And
workers.
also, Ernst &
hire new
Young
people.
is such a leader. I actually have an Ernst & Young person in my book who's been slashing for years. She's a really famous sculptor, and she's been working in their flexibility area. And she's like one of the pioneers of that program. But because Ernst & Young was so successful, actually accounting has been really competitive. All the other accounting firms are really, I cover law firms a lot, and law firms are really far behind when you look at what's happened in accounting firms. And they're both service businesses. You think they'd be able to accomplish the same things, but accounting firms have just been able to do so much more. But Deloitte is another interesting company that I've been writing about a lot, and actually 2 people from Deloitte wrote a book this year called Mass Career Customization. They have a very, and I hear a nodding here, they just have a really innovative, okay, and it's true, right? I love it when you get somebody in the audience who's nodding and has worked there, because I've been on panels with those folks, with one of the folks who was a co-author of that book. What they do there is they have this new program where they basically sit down with everybody from every level of the company. This is not just for professionals, it's at all levels. And you talk about where you are in your career and what you want. I think it's for the next 6 months or the next year. What do you want to be on the fast track? Do you want to be on medium track? Do you want to be in a slow track? Where are you in your life? Where are you in your career? And what
That's
they've
very
noticed,
evolved.
and what they've noticed is that everyone, not just mothers, men, women, people have stuff going on in their outside life, and it affects. You're dealing with an aging parent, you're dealing with some outside problem, or sometimes you want to go gangbusters. You're young, you're fresh out of school, you want to have 3 or 4 years where you just want to face everything that comes in front of you. So what they did is they mapped all the kind of senior people in the firm, and they mapped their career trajectories in terms of how intense they were for that period they were posted to London, and for that period they were in the home office, and the period that they moved people around a lot. And they get these sine curves, and everybody gets one that shows what your path looks like. And now everybody in the company, every 6 months, they get to reevaluate those, and they have a whole analysis of I blogged about this. If you search the New York Times, there's a whole blog post about it. But I thought it was really evolved, and what I liked about it, it was across the board. So many people, so many white kind of corporate America, they have flexibility programs, and it's for the professionals, and they never think about people at other levels. And this is an across-the-board program, and people are really committed to it, and they realized they were losing a lot of money by retraining people. It's all bottom line. It wasn't just because they're nice people,
Right,
Go ahead.
So when I was interviewing people at Ernst & Young, they said, turnover is horrible. Whenever we lose an accountant, it costs a year and a half's worth of salary to replace that person. And they say it's much more valuable to us to have someone 50% time than to have that person not at all. And they do this terrific thing at Ernst & Young that whenever there's a new project team, and it's all project teams, maybe 20 people assigned to do the taxes for a branch of one bank or a division of one bank. And when they form this team, everyone says what commitments they have. Someone might, be dying to go to Pilates twice a week. Another one might have, a sick mother that she has to take care of. And they schedule out everyone's commitments and conflicts, and they arrange for everyone to be covered. And another thing, in the old days, maybe there was just one person who knew the key responsibilities for a project, and if that person's, father died, he might, it would be hard for him to go to the funeral. If his father got very sick, it might be hard for him to leave for a week. So now they make sure for every single thing, there's someone always to cover you.
Right.
And they really thought it through. I mean, it's somewhat different from.
Yeah, and consulting firms, BDO Seidman is a firm that's launched a big a program, another very innovative approach. And they're doing this because they have financial issues. They've got to figure out that, with everybody having various schedules and with needing to service clients in a 24/7 global economy, it's actually helpful to have people that are on different kinds of schedules if you can maximize the way you're using them. So there's benefits to the employer and to the worker when that's being solved.
I want to open it up to questions from the audience. But first, I just wanted to ask Marci, just what would you recommend to people who are seeking jobs? What are some things that have worked for people, especially in the realm of, the social networking and the email and using all the different websites that post jobs? What are some things that you can point people to that are effective?
I would say the number one thing you can do is talk about your experience. And I'm telling you this from firsthand experience. I had been writing what appeared to be a really successful blog for the New York Times called Shifting Careers. And abruptly in October, I was told that it was ending. And my editor was really kind about it. Everybody was really supportive there. I was a freelancer. The Times had announced they're not doing any layoffs, but you know what they could do? They could not renew some contracts, and that's what they did. So I felt, it was not, performance-based. Everyone in this economy, if you go through something like this, you're not alone. So I wrote a blog post about it. I was really, really open. I decided I'm not going to be ashamed. Within a week of writing that blog post, I got all these offers. I've got editors asking me to write for them. I got people offering to help me. So this whole idea of, I think the first thing we want to do when something bad happens, and especially when you lose a job or a gig or anything, is you want to hide under a rock. And
under the blankets.
Yeah, and it's just not the way to make things happen. So unfortunately, just being in a room like this is a really smart thing to do. We can all help each other. We can all trade contacts. We can all know. And if you make a good impression on someone, they remember you. So
even if you don't do a blog or your own website, it would be setting up some kind of page on Facebook that shows your experience, LinkedIn,
all your friends.
Are all those things good to do?
Yeah, I think there's always a smart way to do things and a not so smart way to do things. So, and I think when we get into the realm of social networking, which is something I participate a lot in and I write a lot about, I think you should be careful about how you do this. I interviewed this guy once who was like a young lawyer who was promoting himself through a Google ad, and I used Gmail. So his resume kept on coming. Every time I wrote the word lawyer, his name would appear at the top of my screen, and it was like Web 2.0 lawyer. So
it's a little overkill, right?
Listen. And I thought, oh, I'm going to blog about this guy. What a smart move. The New York Times blogger is going to blog about him. He's bound to get a job. He's going to be so happy. Meanwhile, I went to the site. I was so unimpressed with this guy who called himself a Web 2.0 lawyer. I'm kind of a Web 2.0 person, and I just looked at his site, and he didn't have an interesting blog. He didn't have anything interesting to say. His blog was feeds from the New York Times and other places. He had headlines. He was not doing anything innovative on his blog. The only innovative thing he did was he listed an ad. But there has to be something behind it.
To back it up.
Yeah, so I would say if you've got some talents and you know what you're good at, make sure you get some good people recommending you on LinkedIn. I look at those. Every time I have a phone call these days, I check on somebody on LinkedIn, and I'm really interested in who gave them a recommendation. I think that goes a long way. I'm interested in who they know. So I think that's something we can all spend time spiffing up on. I don't do a call these days with a stranger without checking them out on LinkedIn and seeing if they know anybody in common.
Should people post their full resume on LinkedIn?
Well, your resume is on LinkedIn. You basically
can fill it in.
A resume on LinkedIn. So, I think, there's also, if you are in the market for consulting, I just wrote a blog post about this yesterday. Ask some friends to recommend you who've used you for a service. Ask them to write an email to a few of their friends saying how great you were. Darby did some media training for me. I'd be happy to recommend her to anybody doing media training. That's the kind of way we get people new clients. It's how can you help the person sitting right next to you, really? That is what you should think about.
So from what I've read, all those internet-related things are good for job hunting, but still the old-fashioned face-to-face, getting out and shaking hands.
I think it's a combination, really.
Combination.
And with internet and social networking tools, the big thing is learn how to use them and use them properly. Because if you're not using them properly, they're only going to work against you. I write a lot about this, and follow me on Twitter if anybody's interested in the latest hot social networking tool. I've gotten speaking gigs from responding to requests on Twitter. But you have to understand how these different things work and use them right.
And it's really kind of trial and error, because by the time you get a book about how to use them, it might be outdated. So you really have to kind of get on and...
Yeah, get on and do some internet searching, see what the workplace bloggers are saying about these various tools, because we're playing with them all the time.
Go to heymarci.com.
Yes, come visit.
All right, let's open it up to the audience for questions. You've been sitting through a lot of my questions. I want to hear from you. Go ahead.
I have a question for Marci, please.
Sure.
How do you understand the benefits of the slash type of career, which sounds great, against the potential loss of expertise? Like
Good point.
I'm thinking I would never, God forbid, if I had to have heart surgery, want to pluck my
Well,
heart
how
surgery
about this?
Let me just repeat the question.
Yeah.
Off this surfboard and say, hey, I got a gig for you.
Okay, good question.
Well, Sanjay Gupta
That's
is a
what-
CNN correspondent now.
He's in the book. So I interviewed Sanjay Gupta for the
might
book.
be
So
Surgeon
you
General.
asked the best question, which is, how can I trust a surgeon to work on me when he's out surfing in the other part of his life? So to answer that question, I interviewed Sanjay Gupta, who at that time and now is dividing his time between being a neurosurgeon and being a CNN correspondent, and now he's obviously on tap for being Surgeon General. So slashing got him pretty far, and the way that he did it is he was an expert brain surgeon when he went into journalism. And what happened was, you can't learn everything at once, right? When we build a career, we layer things upon one another. So you spend time building your first area of expertise, and then at some point, you know you have room for something else. Just as I always said, you wouldn't have your first child while you're a resident, right, in medical school. You'd probably try to manage your time a little differently. So it goes with building your slash career. So what Sanjay Gupta did is, when he got the offers from CNN, he decided how he was going to repackage what he did with his hospital, and he reevaluated his relationship, and he only does surgery about once a week. He now relies on interns and residents to brief him weekly on new studies. He also uses this journalism perch that he has to make sure that he's fully up to date on new techniques, but he's not in the operating room every day like he used to be, and people are still quite comfortable using him. So he hasn't left the field either. He's slashing in a way that's very consistent, and that actually makes him better at what he does. He has a lot more human contact. He has, so I think there are slashes that are compatible, and there are slashes that aren't good matches, and that's something to also think about.
Did that answer your question? Good. Okay. Anyone else have a question? Go ahead.
What would you suggest for somebody who's new, who has a career, but they're looking for a career change? No one specific, who's young, obviously, who doesn't necessarily have the references to draw on, or doesn't have all the experience of somebody who's 20 years into their career. If you're not necessarily happy in your job in this economy, and you don't want to necessarily stay for a long time.
I'll start, and then
Yeah, go for it.
Marci will give you the right answer. I think you have to know what you want to do, and then you need the skills or the requirements, the degrees to get there. So I think you have to decide in your own mind, I want to do this, I want to do that. And now's a very good time to spend in graduate school because the job market, or professional school, because the job market isn't very good. But first you have to decide where you want to go, and then you have to figure out what's going to get me there. And will it be a law degree? Will it be an MBA? Will it be a doctorate? And I think now, especially with the economy so bad and unemployment so high, companies, employers can really say, we want the person who has, every single credential. So I think it's harder, so that makes it all the more important to get, the full qualifications that the job you want requires.
I would say it sounds to me like you're needing a few things right now, and it sounds like you really need some mentors. So I would encourage you to go out there and approach some people who do the thing you want to do, or the thing you suspect you want to do, the things you might be interested in. Try to meet some of those people, and this is a good setting to do it. Look at the Penn alumni network and see if there's anybody open to mentoring you, and kind of be careful about how you approach someone. Be humble, be respectful of their time, have some specific targeted questions, do some informational interviews. Once you've kind of figured out a few areas you want to explore, before you even get to the graduate school stage and invest all that money, do some experiments. Do some places where you get to try out that thing. I call it crafting an adult internship. Go volunteer somewhere where you're around a lot of people like that. Go to places where those people congregate. Go to their conferences. Go to panel discussions. Go to industry events. Trail somebody on their job for a little while. When I got out of law school, one of my job offers was to be a public defender, so I went down to the courthouse and I got matched out with a legal aid lawyer, and I spent a half a day with this guy, and I went down in the pens under Manhattan and I interviewed the people awaiting trial. And I didn't like 1 minute of it. I was all ready to say yes to this job, and I had never seen what a day in the life was like. And I was like, wow, I am so glad that people are doing this work, but I couldn't do it even for one night. But for one day, I felt unsafe when I got home. Like, there is these, you got to go see what it feels like to do the work.
I would recommend, if you can't go to graduate school and take out all the loans, or you don't want to, is just take a class at night or on the weekends in the field that you're interested in. When I got out of Penn, I went to a management training program at Chase Manhattan Bank. Here I am again. I knew within 1 minute I was going to absolutely hated it, and I sucked it up for a year and hated it. But at night, I took a class at the New School in television news writing. I'd always watched a lot of television news growing up, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. And it turned out one of the guest speakers who came into the class was a guy who was starting up this new financial news network called CNBC out in New Jersey. And lo and behold, 6 months later, I went and got a job as a coffee getter at CNBC, but that kind of launched my whole way. And look at me now.
She got very good coffee.
Yes.
I did the same thing as Darby. I got into freelance journalism by taking a class at the New School, and I got my first clip for the New York Times while I was in that class.
And they also have the Learning Annex, has all those courses, and it's a great way to learn about the field and meet a lot of people. So, go ahead with the scarf.
So I think that for both Marci and Darby, okay. I think Marci and Darby, you both bring up really good points, and this is very good advice. But from a reality standpoint, I feel like a lot of young people are in jobs that are very demanding hours-wise and don't really allow for extra income to be able to take these types of classes. And in a lot of situations, these just aren't realities that you can do without sacrificing either work or just the amount of time that you have during the day. So how in those situations would you go about sort of attaining information on careers that you want to pursue, but at the same time being true to your employer as is, because you want to show that you have good faith as a worker?
You want to take that?
Yeah, well, one thing, and actually Stu Friedman would be a great person to talk about this. He was the last speaker in this series, and his book, Total Leadership, talks a lot about this. One thing you could do, it sounds like you work for a big company of some kind, because if you're working those kind of hours, my guess is you're in banking or finance or law. If you work for a big institution, there's a good chance that there's a lot going on inside that institution. And sometimes the best way to explore things is within that institution. Get involved on a committee that has something to do with an interest you might have. I bet they have, they're involved in all kind of philanthropic activities, community activities, arts activities. See if there's a way you could do something where you're a team player, you're getting involved in the community that's going on there, or you're helping some other department on a project they're working on because you want to get to know the people from that other area because they have a job that's a little more like what you want to do. And then the other thing is, there's a way to give 100%, not 110%. And I know like people from the high achieving backgrounds here are all used to giving 110%. But if you're not happy, you got to at some point take some time to explore, or else you're never going to figure out what else could make you happier.
Steven, do you have any
this might
advice?
not be a satisfactory answer. Hopefully you get weekends off, or at least one day off. And you could take, many places offer weekend courses. You can get involved in voluntary activities on the weekend that might introduce you to another field you're interested in. You could probably do some networking on weekends. With computers late at night, you could learn a lot about different jobs. But I hope you're not working 100 hours a week, because that makes it hard to look for other things.
Yeah, it is very hard to look for another job while you're working full-time. And there were a couple points in my career where I thought, oh my gosh, I have to quit this job so I can dedicate my time to looking for a new job. And everyone would always say, oh, it's always better to look for a new job while you still have a job. And I used to hate hearing people say that, But it is good if you have to pay the rent and stuff to have the job. But I would, if you don't have time for a class or the opportunity, just try to read as much as you can. Even, on the weekends, just Google as much as you can, different information, and just use all those resources, networking things to talk to people if you're really thinking about making a big switch. Go ahead with the white and sleeve.
One of the points that you've made, and I've heard it made by other presenters, is that this is a time to innovate, a time to be an entrepreneur. And the question that I have is, in a period where banks are not lending, how does one do that really effectively?
That-
I'm not sure who I'm putting that question
That's a
to.
terrific question. And if you have a great idea, you can probably still get money, but it will be harder to get money now than 3 years ago when you had a great idea. But it's very hard.
Maybe one should just buy a house.
You should be born with a very rich uncle.
No, but I also do think there are some businesses that don't require a lot of capital investments, and service-oriented businesses. I mean,
Consulting type.
consulting businesses. So this is the time to maybe think of a business that doesn't require a capital. Right. Right. I
Right.
mean, this is a time to think of a service-oriented business, and I agree with you. When money is tight, I don't think this is the time to come up with a business model that requires money.
But there are government grants that you can get and nonprofit grants that you can get. If you Google those kind of things, there are all sorts of organizations, especially for women who are looking to start businesses. So I would try to look into that and see what kind of funding you can get that way if you need it to get started up.
It's of course harder to break in anything, even in a service business, because people have less money to spend. Service businesses are closing down. But if you're personable, if you provide very good services, if you do provide services at a lower price, you can break in there. But it ain't easy right now.
Go ahead in the checks.
This is somewhat along the same lines. I've been slashing for years between
Slashing and burning.
Let's hope not.
between Nurse International, nonprofit management, currently adjunct professor. And the last few years I've been trying to build adjunct professor sort of as legitimizing consultant work. The consultant work has totally crashed. Do I go back and start searching for nonprofit careers? Do I continue to try, and how long do I continue to try to build a career in consultant work at this point?
Well, it depends.
My consultant work has been in corporate social responsibility, which, as you pointed out, is an integral part of corporate work, but it's also the area that's being cut, or often being cut, if it's particularly if. I won't go into the details there.
This may be an opportunity. I mean, I think some of the most successful slashing I've seen is people who figure out how to teach in many different ways. I have this chapter in my book called Writing, Teaching, Speaking, Consulting, the 4 slashes that go with anything. It's all about kind of training, teaching, communicating ideas. And I've seen some people create some very successful slash models when they adjunct for a number of places rather than just one place. One of my writing mentors, a writing teacher who taught that first class I took at the New School, has had a thriving career as a writing teacher because she teaches so much. Like, I never saw anybody who could teach so much. She teaches 2 classes a term, and then in the summers, and then get in special retreats, and has figured out a way to kind of always be teaching and then deliver the new form of teaching. So when online teaching became popular, she's doing that and doing webinars. And so there is a way to take the teaching to the next level if you feel like the consulting work isn't there, because I do think there's young people coming up and through the ranks and reinventors mid-career who want to get into the area that you have. So I just wonder if you might want to think about the delivery vehicle, and if the thing you call consulting, because it goes to organizations, isn't so thriving right now, maybe you want to focus on delivering that content to individuals in more ways.
I would think that corporate responsibility might actually be one of the few growing fields, that there's a push for more regulation both in government and in the private sector. So maybe, but a lot of consulting firms are cutting back, but there might be niches within consulting firms where they are doing some hiring. So many nonprofits have lost so much money with Bernie Madoff. I think there might not be. It might be very hard.
First to market, then Bernie Madoff.
First to market, then Bernie Madoff. I don't think there's a ton of hiring right now in nonprofits. But again, if you're the right person who applies at the right time, sometimes you'll be lucky and get that job.
By the way, in the education that we've been talking about, aging boomers looking to reinvent is the biggest education market right now. I've just been contacted by community colleges that are working on their curriculum, by all kinds of groups that are looking to retrain people who can't retire because they can't afford to. So think about that as another market to be going to.
Marci, I'm an earlier Marci. I was the longtime business editor Do I need it? Hi, I was the longtime business editor of Women's World magazine. So I did what you did 20 years ago. And I want to say both to this lady and to the younger lady who talked earlier that senior services, which is what I've switched into, there are actually terrible shortages in various areas of senior services. If somebody is looking for an attractive graduate school opportunity, I really suggest that you consider social work, especially social work geared to geriatric capacities, because I mean that there are really shortages, which is amazing in this economy in all over the senior services arena.
Could you elaborate on, sorry, could you elaborate on when you say senior services, what you really mean? Like what kind of?
Well, everything in assisted living, in independent living, which is people who are don't need as much medical care as assisted living, where there's a little medical care, and then if you need more, you actually need a nursing home. But the entire geriatric arena is literally booming. And I think for those of us who've come from, I mean, I've been in finance most of my career, and people are so nice and so helpful, and it's not dog eat dog. And I really think that anybody who is truly looking for a new field, especially anybody over the age of 40, consider senior services. Anybody who wants to talk to me, you're welcome to do so.
Okay, I want to wrap it up, and so we can get Eric to work back there at the bar. We can enjoy some beverages and mingle a little bit, but I wanted to ask Stephen one last question as we wrap up. You talked a little bit in the preface to the paperback edition of your book about there may be a silver lining to this financial crisis, that perhaps this will really bring more attention, media attention, the attention of lawmakers to the situation that American workers find themselves in. Are you seeing that happen, and do you feel that that will continue?
I think there is a silver lining. One of the points I made in the book is that, for several years, the nation's politicians were paying far too little attention to the many, many problems the nation's workers have: stagnating wages, worsening health benefits, inferior 401ks replacing very good pensions. Americans, we're the only industrialized country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid sick days to every worker. We're the only industrialized country that doesn't guarantee paid vacation to every worker.
There are no federal laws about that.
No federal laws, no state laws. In the 25 nations of the European Union, everyone's guaranteed at least 4 weeks vacation. We're the only, we're one of 4 nations on earth. Swaziland, Liberia, and Papua New Guinea are the other. We're only 4 nations on earth that doesn't have paid maternity leave. So I think, with the recession, with the arrival of, Barack Obama, the nation is starting to focus more on some of these problems that, workers and their families are having on work-family balance. So, we do have this horrible economic situation, but I think, there is a focus on not just stimulating the economy, but trying to make things better, for typical workers.
All right. I want to thank Stephen Greenhouse. His book is The Big Squeeze, and it's available for purchase right outside the door. And Marci's book is One Person, Multiple Careers. Credit card, cash, no checks.
And we're happy to sign copies.
Exactly. And the beverages are part of your admission, so you get that. So thank you. I think we're going to turn it over to Wendy.
So I wanted to thank Marci and Stephen and Darby. It was a very inspiring presentation. There was a time there where it felt very dark and gloomy, and you succeeded fantastically to uplift it a bit. And I think there are a couple of points, and I think the biggest point that came out of this was self-training, growth, education, and that's why you're here. They mention it many, many times as areas of growth for jobs, but also a need that is out there for us to expand our growth, our awareness of the market and of ourselves. So thank you very much for that. And we have some little gifts for you.
Thank you.
And if you want to buy the books, they are outside. And reminder, the next event is March 3rd. It is called Your Next Career Move and How to Market Yourself. We have a great panel, so you can register on PennNYC.org. And the reception is offered by the Trustees Council of Penn Women. And I want to make a little joke here because we got many, many emails from guys saying, is this just a girls' event? And I said, well, ladies are paying for the drinks. If you don't mind the ladies paying for the drinks, you can come. So please, please enjoy yourself. And thank you very much, Lee. And thank you very much, Marci, Stephen, and Darby.
Thank you.
Thank you.